With Florida State trying everything in their power to try and get out of the ACC, including filing a lawsuit, it has fans across the country, especially Big 12 fans, talking about what teams could the Big 12 get if the ACC implodes. And there are 4 teams that come up in almost every conversation. We're going to look at those 4 teams and see how well they fit into the Big 12, and we're going to do that right after this word from my sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up? Come on in, make yourself at home, bail yourself up to the bar, and let me serve you up another shot of top-shelf college football content. On tap at KZA Corner today, we're going to look at Virginia Tech, Pitt, NC State, and Louisville and see how well do these brands, do these teams, do these programs fit into the Big 12 conference if the Big 12 has a chance to get them. It's a big if at this point. It's all speculation because the ACC may hold on and survive this thing. But if they don't, and those teams don't find a home in the SEC or the Big 10, can the Big 12 get them just like they did the Four Corner schools? Well, I've got a spreadsheet we're going to look at as well as some other graphics in this show, so stick around. Real quick, though, before we get to it, I want to give a shout-out to some of my VIP channel members here at KZA's Corner. The 4 shout-outs for today are Bill G, Phil Masters, Hellbilly, Tax Sprint. If you want to become a member of the VIP club, hit the join button below or go to the link in my description box. Go to my channel page and join there. Now let's get back to the video. There are 5 criteria that Brett Yormark talked about using when they are looking at potential expansion candidates. They are rivalries, geography, athletic performance, brand upside, and academics. So we're going to kind of look at these 5 metrics for all these 4 teams to see just how well they stack up with the rest of the Big 12. First, let's talk about rivalries. Now, I did a previous show a few weeks ago with Wild Ute, who's a contributor over at Big 12 Mafia and the College Football Mafia. They are all friends of the show. I'm going to link to that video at the end. It was focused on Virginia Tech. And on that, we used a site called No Rivalry to look at the West Virginia Tech rivalry. Well, for this episode, we're going to look at a couple rivalries as well. The first one we're going to look at is Pitt and West Virginia. Now, we all know about the Backyard Brawl, one of the most popular rivalries in all of college football. And when you look at this rivalry over at NoRivalry.com, which is a site that compares rivalries and measures them, you can see that Pitt considers their 2 biggest rivals to be Penn State and West Virginia. Penn State first, but West Virginia not far behind with a 37.5 score to Penn State's 41.2. And when you scroll down here and look at it on a bar graph, the dark blue being how Pitt fans feel about West Virginia, and the light blue how West Virginia fans feel about Pitt. While West Virginia scores a 37.5 as Pitt's rival, Pitt scores a 59.1 as West Virginia's rival. This is called the reverse rivalry points here as you're looking at Pitt. Penn State, on the other hand, only considers Pitt to be a rival at a 25.3 scale. So West Virginia fans have a lot more hatred toward Pitt fans. So hatred's a strong word, but you get the gist of it, right? A lot harder feelings from West Virginia fans back toward Pitt fans than Penn State fans do with Pitt. So that makes for a very heated rivalry. Very, very heated rivalry. Let's take a look at another big rivalry that could potentially come into the Big 12 if these 4 teams will enter the league, and that is the Cincinnati-Louisville rivalry. Now, we're obviously looking at this from the Louisville perspective, but Louisville looks at their 2 biggest rivals as being Kentucky and Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati doesn't score quite as high on the scale as Kentucky, but they are still a rival. And let's be honest, Cincinnati hasn't been a Power 5 school for 10 years. So I'm sure that might weigh this a little bit. And if they were in the same conference, I think it would be an even stronger rivalry, or at least would become one. Now, when you go down here, you see, yes, Louisville considers Kentucky their biggest rival. Kentucky fans don't feel quite as strongly about it as Louisville fans do. Yet, even though there's only a 15.7 rivalry score on Cincinnati for Louisville fans, when you reverse that, Louisville scores a 42.9 on Cincinnati's rivalry scale. So Cincinnati fans have a lot more disdain for Louisville than Louisville fans do towards Cincinnati. So again, it would make for a very, very heated rivalry potentially in the Big 12. So for those two reasons, either Louisville or Pitt would be good rivalry additions. And heck, we've already talked about Virginia Tech and their rivalry with West Virginia. You can check that out in the link that I'm going to leave to that video I did with Wild Ute. Virginia Tech and West Virginia have a good rivalry as well. Now, when you look at NC State from a rivalry perspective, you don't see a rivalry in the conference, but that doesn't mean NC State wouldn't be a good addition because they do fit a lot of the other metrics that we're going to look at, which we're going to look at on this spreadsheet I'm going to pull up for you. All right, we're going to look at geography being the next criteria. And NC State, again, doesn't really fit that, at least on the surface. But what it would do, if you get a school in the state of North Carolina, right now you have a big gap between Florida and West Virginia, right? Or Florida and Ohio in Cincinnati's case. North Carolina, getting a team in the state of North Carolina helps fill that gap. For your Olympic teams, your non-revenue sports travel, it would be easier. You could go travel, hit up the highway, play a game in NC State if you're UCF, then head up and play a game at West Virginia or vice versa. Makes travel a little bit easier in that regard, I think, so that it would fit there. Obviously, it would get the Big 12 into a new state in the state of North Carolina. That would be a plus. I'm not sure how much that matters as much today since we're going to streaming, but it still matters. It's more fans watching Big 12 football. NC State fans are likely not watching Big 12 football right now. But if they're in the Big 12 conference, they're more likely to tune in to a Texas Tech TCU game or a Texas Tech Kansas State game or whatever, because they're in that conference and it will mean more to them, right? So getting into a new state, bringing new fans into the fold is a big deal, especially a state growing as fast as North Carolina. Now, with the other teams, you look at Pitt, Virginia Tech, and gives you two more teams in the East. Compare with Cincinnati, West Virginia, and even UCF for that matter. Even though UCF's down in the southern part, they're at least in the Eastern time zone. Now, Louisville, I talked about NC State filling a gap. Louisville would do the same. It gets you a little bit further west and would fill a little bit of a gap between teams in Iowa, Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma, who have to come east. Louisville kind of gets you a team right there closer to the Midwestern part of the country. So, again, I think Louisville fits geographically as well. So, Louisville not only brings you really two rivalries, because Louisville had somewhat of a rivalry with West Virginia as well when they were in the Big East together. Not as heated as Virginia Tech or Pitt, but still a good rivalry nonetheless. And it helps get you closer to the Midwest, kind of fills that gap between the East and the Midwest by being in the state of Kentucky. Now let's look at athletic performance. Now, to do this, I took a metric called the Blue Blood ranking. I used a website called Winsipedia, where you can compare or look at rankings of different teams. It's a good way to look at schools and how they've performed historically in athletics, right? Well, when you look at this, I took these four schools and compared them with the median in the Big 12. Now, I didn't want to use average this time. I used to use average in the past, but what average does, if you have outliers, teams that are really high or really low on a scale, those teams affect the average, where if you take the median, it takes what's in the middle of the conference. In this case, it would be the average of the numbers 8 and 9 teams in the league. That forms your median. To me, that's a better comparison when you're doing these comparisons like this. But anyway, Blue Blood ranking. Now, this one right here made me about half sick to my stomach. But Pitt actually had a Blue Blood ranking of 25, which would be higher than anybody else in the Big 12 if they would come into the league. Really, really bothered me to see that. Unfortunately, I have to say something positive about Pitt, and I do not like doing that. Virginia Tech's Blue Blood ranking was 45. Again, would be higher than the median of the Big 12, which is 50. Louisville, slightly lower than the Big 12 median of 50, but only at 61. So it's not drastically lower and would still be higher than a lot of schools in the conference league. So would be one spot higher than 50. So again, all four of these schools, in my opinion, would fit in the Big 12 from a athletic performance perspective and a blue blood ranking perspective. Now let's look at the academic piece. Now, I used U.S. News and World Report. I know a lot of people don't like U.S. News and World Report, but for the sake of this video, for the sake of time, and because it's probably the most commonly used source for academic rankings, that's what I used. But the median in the Big 12 is 120th in the country. That's the average U.S. News and World Report ranking as far as national universities go. 120th. Not great. Not great. Pitt would be 67th. So it would be a lot higher than the median. Virginia Tech would be 47th, much higher. Louisville would be 195, which would be near the bottom, but would still be ahead of West Virginia and Texas Tech in the league. And then NC State would be 60th. So all three of Pitt, Virginia Tech, and NC State would be ranked higher than any other school currently in the current Big 12, or in the new Big 12, I should say, because I'm including the PAC schools in this conversation, in the ranking of national universities. So academically, they would actually improve the standing of the Big 12 academically. 3 of the 4 would, and Louisville would still be a fit in the conference. So again, when you look at academics, all 4 schools fit in the Big 12, and you could even argue would boost the Big 12 if you brought them in, especially Pitt, Virginia Tech, and NC State. Now, when it comes to brand upside, there are a lot of ways you can look at brand upside, but I wanted to look at TV viewership here, because TV viewership is kind of a metric that TV networks obviously use it, and fans like to use it when arguing whether their team's valuable or not. And there are a lot more things to brand upside than just TV viewership. But I went to Run It Back with Zach, which is a very good blog over on Medium, run by someone named Zach Miller. He follows college football TV viewership very closely and always reports on it. I went back and looked at his 2023 rankings, right? And that's where I got these numbers from. Big 12 median viewership in 2023 was an average of 1.02 million viewers a week. Not bad. Not bad, actually. Man, when you look at the ACC numbers for these teams, it was abysmal. It was terrible. Louisville was the only team of the 4 who would actually be better than the median in the Big 12. Louisville had good viewership with 1.36 million viewers on average each week. On the other hand, when you look at the other 3, when you look at Pitt, 690,000 viewers per week, Virginia Tech, 400,000 per week. That would actually be lower than any team in the new Big 12, lower than Houston, lower than UCF, lower than Cincinnati. It would be lower than any team in the new Big 12. And then NC State would come in at 660,000. All 3 of those schools would be near the bottom of the Big 12 in viewership. Now, there's a caveat here. TV viewership, you have to take a lot of things into account here. You have to take into account what channel the game's on, what other games are on at that time. Is it on a primary channel? Is it on a cable channel? Is it streaming? Who's the opponent? I mean, for example, if you're playing a game against Ohio State versus a game against Vanderbilt, it's going to rate differently. So, but every game was included in this ranking, so it could be slightly skewed. But just for a snapshot, a 10,000-foot view of TV viewership, Louisville really moves the needle in that regard and would be very, very highly ranked in the Big 12 as far as TV viewership versus the other 3. The other 3 would do nothing to help TV viewership in the Big 12, in my opinion, which is surprising to me, because Pitt and Virginia Tech, especially Virginia Tech, historically have been very good brands, especially in college football. Now, NC State, again, I was surprised to see their number that low as well. But even with that said, when you look at all the other things that can affect brand value, other than just TV ratings, I still think all 3 of these schools would fit into the Big 12. So if I were Brett Yormark and I have the chance to get these 4 schools in my conference, I'm doing it. Now, if I had to pick one out of the 4, man, it's hard. Wild Union and I said in our previous video that we would take Virginia Tech likely over the rest. Man, I'm telling you, after seeing Louisville's numbers and seeing how good they do in TV viewership and how they fit geographically and how they kind of fill that Midwest gap, I may actually lean toward Louisville being my number 1 ad if I'm Brett Yormark. I really would. Maybe slightly over Virginia Tech. As a West Virginia fan, and for the rivalry's sake, obviously I want Pitt and Virginia Tech in my league. But when you're looking what's better for the entire conference, I actually think Louisville would be not my number one pick. I think Louisville would be number one. I think Virginia Tech is number two because it gets you into the state of Virginia, gets you a rivalry, and gets you a great brand. And then I'm going with probably NC State as my third pick because it gets you into North Carolina. And I would probably pick Pitt fourth, even though I would love to have the Backyard Brawl in the conference. I think overall value, it would be Louisville, Virginia Tech, NC State, and Pitt in that order. You can tell me I'm wrong in the comment section. If you think your order would be different, let me know. What would your order be? What team would be the top priority for you if you were Brett Yormark and the ACC's collapsing all around them? Which teams are you trying to pick off and in what order? I wanted you to tell me. Cannot forget to remind you that I have partnered with West Virginia Sports Now. If you want to join the Holler, which is their VIP subscription service, you get a 40% discount by using promo code Couz over at wvsportsnow.com. I will put a link to their website in the description box if I can actually remember to do it this time. But go to wvsportsnow.com, sign up for the Holler, get behind-the-scenes looks on their stuff that is only available to VIP members. You can do it for $21 a year versus the $34 a year deal that is to the general public if you use promo code Couz, C-O-U-Z. Remember that video I talked about multiple times that I did with Wild Ute about Virginia Tech? You can check it out by clicking the link right here on the screen. Have a top shelf day and Q Country Roads.